see if there's anything there. I try to keep an open mind, but I think you've run into a dead end here that there's just nothing there.
Okay, that's what I'm saying is that I mean it's for you it's nothing there. For me, everything they're showing actually clearly and unequivocally that there is God there. So, and that's why I would say is there's no way for me to really make you to see it, because ultimately it's up to your own will. That if you want to see it, that you open your eyes, you can see. But if you are not willing to see, or if you just want to ignore it, sorry, I can't really help. I can make you to see at all. But I think the main point I try to make it is that secular science now trying to explain those miraculous work of God in the universe and giving them to the material cause. Now, God is actually like a piece of paper using the seed and zygote and actually making something which is beyond our ability to make and even beyond our ability to truly understand. But once we give them to the material cause, there's nothing left out there, and we can see as a sign for God. So that's why I think that now I share with you in recent days there are some a serious discussion regarding this reductionist way of understanding of the universe. And one of those guys, I think he came up with good idea. He said that his argument is that Bhaskar, I think his name was. I shared the article with you, and he basically argues that what science defines as a law is nothing other than the description of the regularity in the universe. And his point that the descriptive regularity of what you observe in the universe cannot really explain the reality. That's why he come up with the argument. He said there has to be powers behind those things that you observe in the universe. I find that one is more reasonable in the sense that now this guy says that he's saying, you know what, when you really look at those material causes, that you think they are the cause of the fact that you get, like the example he mentioned, water. You get water, you look the cause and hydrogen and oxygen. Now he's saying that the hydrogen and oxygen, neither of them are sufficient enough to produce water. In other words, even though when they come together, they all, in a certain way, they always result in water, there is no way scientifically for you to claim that what the property that water has comes from hydrogen and oxygen, nothing else. They say, no, there's always something more than what you see as the main component. Now, that's why the concept of emergence arise in discussion.
Well, going back to your first statement, you said that I didn't want to see it. I think what you meant is I didn't want to believe that God exists. No, that's not the case. I want to believe that God exists. I think I don't want to believe that your God exists, because I think he's imagined to do a lot of bad things. But I do wish that some God existed, a particular kind of God, a God who is perfectly good, just, rational, and loving, which doesn't correspond to the Muslim God. But I wish some kind of God exists. So it's not a lack of wanting. I certainly want a particular kind of God to exist. It's just that I can't allow myself to believe in something which goes against reason. And your idea goes against reason. Now, referring to the paper that you're talking about here, yes, I have reviewed the paper. What you should do is spell the last name of the person you referred to, so that any of our viewers who want to follow up and Google the guy's name can investigate it more thoroughly. I think you're misinterpreting, though, what he's saying. You used the phrase powers behind. I don't think he means powers behind. I think he means inherent powers, which really is the same thing that we've been calling properties. In other words, an electron has properties. It behaves in certain ways. Is pretty much the same thing as it has powers. That is, it behaves in certain ways. I don't know that there's any other way to describe it. Different things in nature have different properties. If you want to say they have different powers, I don't have a big problem with that. He doesn't mean that there's some kind of super intelligence pushing these things or creating these things or moving these things around. That's not what he means at all. I think you're misinterpreting him.
I will clarify that one. I don't think I intentionally do anything like this, but I will try to explain what I mean. His name is Bhaskar, is Bhaskar, and I think what I like a lot of things in his article, and I think, of course, he's I will say a one step closer to the reality compared to atheists and secular scientists. The main argument in the article is that we reductionist way of explaining the reality is not really helpful to understand the whole, to see the whole picture. And I like it, he used three terms. He said there is a reality, there is actuality, and there is empiricism. So, and in his term, that reality is the powers behind actuality, and actuality is the sequence of events, happening, and you might observe some of those, you might not observe all those events, but it's happening. And empiricism is your experience of those events. Now, his term is that modern secular science focus on empiricism, and basically starting from David Hume, the whole point is that, if you can do experiment, you can observe, you can experience and come up with theory and test it, that's the reality, or that is the scientific knowledge. His term is that that's really not describing the reality. That's just empiricism, and that's the limited category of the reality. In his term, that what you observe cannot be attributed to those apparent cause. There has to be powers, and you're right, he called inherent powers, and even some of his followers come up with the powers particulars. Basically, the idea is that at the subatomic level, they claim that there must be some particulars, and they must have powers which actually do those acts and bring those things into reality, into action. So that's why the point in that article is you cannot simply look at the cause and effect relationship as seems to you and explain the reality based on that one. And I think the best example is like remote control and TV. Yes, you can say there is a connection, you push on certain button, you get the image on screen, but the scientific explanation doesn't go beyond that. That's why the article says if you really want to understand reality, you need to go deep you need to go deep to understand the mechanism behind the reality we experience in the universe.
I really didn't understand his distinction between reality, actuality, and empiricism. I think probably it can be broken down into two categories rather than one. I think there is reality, and then there is our description of reality. And what we do is the best we can. Scientific laws, what are they? They're not controlling, and I agree with him. Scientific laws don't exist out there. They don't control things. Scientific laws are merely descriptions by human beings of the regularities in nature. That's all they are. And they're formulated usually in terms of if X, then Y. I mean, that's kind of the basic formulation of a scientific law. It's just a description. Maybe you